When he went to Portugal with Dr. Richard Henschel.
When who went to Portugal? When Hugo went to Portugal?
Yeah.
Okay.
When Hugo and Richard Henschel went to Portugal to look for another possibility to be there, Richard Henschel stayed in Portugal. And Hugo said, I have my wife in Germany, I have to go back. My wife and my child in Germany. And he came back and he said, I'm not going to Portugal. This is a strange country for me. I'm not going there. And then at that time we still lived in our apartment, but shortly after that we were chased out of it. We had to get out of it and leave everything, and we're looking for other possibilities to stay and stayed with other people. This is so far away from me, as I cannot even tell you how far away this is from me.
It's okay.
I know that Anita got very sick there, and I said, this child has to go out from here. This is not for a child to be here at this time. And that's when I was saying, but what I was talking about before.
You were going to say something about when Hugo was in the camp with. There was a story you were going to tell us.
What was it?
Hugo was in the forced labor. Is that what it was?
Hugo was in forced labor.
Yeah, Hugo was in forced labor much
factory.
later.
At a factory. You're going to tell us the story.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that. That's right. And then later on, Hugo was in forced labor. They were in forced labor, and he was together with a friend of his. And I don't know his name offhand.
Henschel.
No, Henschel was only... Henschel at that time was already in Portugal. Okay. He stayed in Portugal. And he was there, and he was safe. And no, but what I wanted to say is, I forgot again. You see, this is what happens.
Hugo was in forced labor, and he had a friend.
Yeah.
He was in the factory working.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Now I know what I wanted to say. Hugo was in forced labor in a factory, and the parole came out that the Nazis would come and would get all the Jews, and they would be shipped out. And he heard it, and his friend said, listen, this is something serious. I'm not staying here. I'm going and hide someplace. And Hugo said, that's no sense. I mean, it's no sense to hide. Anyway, he did not hide, and he was one of them who got with the next transport to Auschwitz. That's what I wanted to tell you. He was taken from his work there and was, together with other people, sent to Auschwitz. That was the time when he was sent to Auschwitz.
Mom said that she had heard that it was sort of like the boy who cried wolf, where they kept hearing that the Gestapo was coming.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
They would hide, and then finally one time they heard, because they never came.
He didn't hide. His friend hid. His friend was saved. His friend is now in Australia. His friend is in Australia right now.
His friend told you
He
this.
got out. He got out. I don't know how he got out. I know he's in Australia. But Hugo said he's not going to hide, and he worked there. And they got him. They got him. They got the whole place, because there were all Jewish people working there.
Susie was saying that Mom said that there were many false alarms. That the Gestapo
And
were coming
there were, of course, there were false alarms. That's true. They heard this before, and they didn't hide. And this time he said, you know, it doesn't sound quite kosher to me, and I want to go in hiding. Let's go in hiding. And Hugo said, no, it's not going in hiding, because this is too much for him. I don't know what he said. Anyway, that was a time when this friend was saved and he was not saved. And I'm sure, if you think about it, if you really worked on it, that a lot of people got out of Germany, even with the threat of the Nazis there, because they worked on it, and they got out of it. And I tried to get them out to Switzerland, and I couldn't get him out. He didn't want to come. It was just, he did not, that was like a block in his head.
again about how you found out that he was sent to Auschwitz?
That he was, much later I heard that. That all of a sudden I didn't hear from him anymore, and I didn't know what happened. And then this guy wrote to me from Australia what happened. This whole story I know from this guy in Australia. He wrote me the story. He heard that the whole transport was shipped to Auschwitz. I don't know, what was his name? I can't think of his name right now.
Do you have that letter, do you think?
No, he called me. He didn't write. Writing at this time was not very much in fashion to write to people. Nothing, he called at the time. But that was much later, that I heard about it. I knew that something happened because I didn't hear from Hugo anymore. My father was out at the time. Everybody was out at the time.
You want to mention RuthKarliner, the kindergarten? We didn't talk about that either.
Huh?
Wait, I want to ask you first about your father and Bertha. They were on the last train out of Berlin,
Yeah,
you said?
yeah.
How did they get on the last train out? That sounds.
They didn't know it was the last train, but it was the last train, we found out later. And they got on. I mean, Bertha didn't want to go because her sister was still in Germany. And she thought she has to be there for her sister. So my father said, okay, we try to get her out too. But finally she decided, yes, she would go. That was a long... And then we found out that this was the last train. There was no more other train out of Germany. The Jews had no chance anymore to get out. They got out with $25 in their whatever they had. That was all they had.
Where did they go?
They went to, where did they go? Not Switzerland. They went to.
Did you go to Cuba?
Oh no, that was much later. That was much
Did
later. To Cuba, they went much later.
You had the Schulers were in Paris
Hmm?
at that time?
Who?
The Schulers.
The Schülers?
They were in Paris?
Oh, the Schülers lived in Paris at that time.
They got out early.
But the Schülers lived in Paris, but they were also deported. But later, that was later. That was, I don't know when that was. They went when my uncle was supposed to be deported, and my aunt didn't have to go, but she went with him. She didn't want to leave him. So my aunt and my uncle, they both were deported. We don't know where to. We have no idea. From Paris. From Paris.
So they were sent to.
Yeah, we don't know where they were sent to. I think they were sent to in the Auschwitz neighborhood. It doesn't have to be Auschwitz. There were so many camps at that time.
So who else?
And the kids, I mean, my uncle, my aunt, my uncle had two sons, Gerd and Rudi. They were both in Paris. Gerd was a dentist, and Rudi had a store or something like that. And Rudi stayed all in Paris. He was all through Hitler, through the war in Paris. He only died a couple of years ago in Paris. He survived there, you know. He was in the Maquis, in the underground, and he survived. And Gerd went to Australia, to South Africa, and got married in South Africa. And then he came back, and he lived in London. And he's still living in London. He's still living. Gerd is still living. And he has a son and a daughter, all living in England now.
But you can't remember where your father and Bertha went when they got on that last train. You don't
I'm
remember?
just trying to get this. Wait a minute. No, they came to America. They went via, somehow they got on a boat to America. They came to, at that time, They went on a boat to America. They got on I don't know exactly where.
It's been incredible.
I think it was in Spain or something. I don't know exactly where it was. But anyway, they came to America at this
With
time.
no possessions.
Huh?
With no possessions.
With nothing.
Just whatever they had in their pocket.
Nothing. They didn't have nothing. They came.
Mom said they went to Cuba. When did they go to Cuba?
Oh, no, that was much later.
They came to the States first.
No, excuse me. They went to Cuba. That's what it was. They came with a boat to Cuba. And they stayed in Cuba for, I think, a year or so. And from Cuba, they got, of course, they got in touch with the family, with Ralph and so. And through Ralph, Sylvia brought them actually back to America.
When you were at the Kinderheim still with Anita.
At that time, I still was in Switzerland, yeah.
So did you speak to your father when he was in Cuba?
No, I didn't hear from my father in Cuba. I knew that he was on the way to America, but I didn't know that he was in Cuba. But that I learned much later. The whole story he told us when we came here. You know, I was with Anita I was visiting Anita in Switzerland, and I stayed because my husband and my father was still in Germany at that time. And they both called me, and I shouldn't come back. I should stay in Switzerland.
That was Kristallnacht?
Yeah. That wasn't in the wartime where Anita was. You know, in the Kinderheim. In the children's home where Anita was, I was visiting. And I was going back because I only brought things I had for the 2 weeks, so I wanted to stay. And I wanted to go back to Germany. And they called me not to come back because they had something terrible happened in Germany.
What did Opa do in Berlin? What did he do for work?
He had his own. He had his own business. Opa had his own business in Berlin. I mean, before. But then he had to work for the Nazis. He had to clean the streets.
What kind of business?
Huh?
What kind of business?
He had, first of all, he had, what do you call, what do you,
Was it advertising?
no, he was partly he was partly in advertising. And then he had to go into the war and had to work for them. That was, you know, we had, wait a minute, I have to think something. My father was in the First World War. Then he came back and he got into advertising and had good business. He had a good business doing advertising. Like here, these people have advertising, right? And then when Hitler came, he had to, I don't know, I wasn't there anymore. He had to work for them, he had to work for the Nazis. Whatever they told him to do, he had to do. And he did. But in the meantime, he was working on going, Ralph was already in America, and he was working on the idea of to go to America. My father was absolutely, definitely going to America. That was his intentions. He didn't want to stay in Germany. He didn't want to work for the Nazis. He told them that. My father was a very funny man. They told him he didn't clean properly. He said, he cleaned enough, it's enough, he's tired. And he went home. That was my father. They didn't say anything. But I mean, he came really out with the last train. I mean, we found out later on that this was the last train that came out of Germany with Jews on it.
So Ralph was in New York.
Ralph at that time was maybe in Switzerland. But he came out of Switzerland in, what was it? It was 39 or so. He went out very fast. Ralph wasn't very long in Switzerland.
He went to New York and he was
He
a
went.
practicing psychiatrist.
Yeah, he went, and then he came. I don't even know when exactly when he came to 30.
But he helped.
Must have been 39 or something like that. That he was 38 or 39.
Did Ralph help to get Opa into
No,
the US?
Ralph had nothing. Ralph. Opa got out of Germany through Ralph, I think. Through Ralph and through Max Gutmann, the brother of his wife, of Bertha. He was already in America, and he brought my father out of America. He was a very nice man. He was much nicer than his sister. I was very fond of Max Gutmann.
What happened to Max?
It's a very interesting story, but I'm not the person to tell it.
Do you know what happened to Max?
Oh, because he died. He would be 120 years old or something like this.
Yeah.
Max Gutmann was in, what is this?
No, there was. No, what are you going to say about Max? What were you going to say about Max?
Max Gutmann was a big businessman here. He was very. He had bought houses on 3rd Avenue. He had money. He had bought houses on 3rd Avenue, and he had a very nice apartment near Riverside Park. I knew him. I liked Max Gutmann. That was the only one of the whole family whom I liked, who was really a nice guy.
There was a story that I think.
But then I was already also in America.
There was a story that you had told us a few years ago about you were on the train from Berlin going to visit Anita in Switzerland, and you were going through Austria on the train, and
no, not through Austria. To Germany.
The policeman entered your compartment and they arrested a Jewish man on the train.
What?
The police came into your compartment?
Yeah, they came in our apartment, and there was a man in there, and they looked through everything, and they took the man out, and he never came back. You know, they found something on him that that was still on the borderline between Germany and Switzerland. That was right on the border. They came to look for people. And they looked for everybody, and they didn't do anything to me.
It could have been you.
I was just telling them that I was going to visit my daughters in Switzerland. I was very, it was not interesting for them, you know. There was no sign that they wanted to do anything to me, nothing. Only this guy they took out, I remember that.
But that must have been scary. That must have been scary for you.
At that time, darling, everything was scary. Being on the train was scary. You didn't know what happens to you. You had to be as
discreet.
You know, I wasn't being made up or anything. I looked very like a poor housewife or something like this. And they asked me, "Where are you going?" So I said, "I'm going. My daughter's in Switzerland, and I'm going to visit her." So that's good enough for them. I was not a subject for them, you know, at that time. I wasn't. I didn't look Jewish. You know, I didn't look Jewish, so that was it. The other guy wasn't a Jew either, but I think he was not a German either. He was just something very funny. And you know, you cannot explain times like that. When I went on that, I remember very well my father and my husband and my father brought me to the train. I remember that very well. But when I was on the train, I don't remember anything. I was on the train, and nothing happened to me. But I was in no way ostentatious or something like that. There was no reason to do anything to me.
You didn't stand out.
Yeah, I was not. That didn't stand out at all. I was like a mouse. They asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm going to Switzerland to visit my daughter." That's all.
So besides going to visit her in 38, did you visit Mom
Yeah.
other times? Did you write to her? What sort of contact did you have? How much contact did you have with her before you were
With Anita?
Yeah, when she was
All the contact I needed. I took her back later to Germany. And
When?
I think 2 years later. I took her back and I brought her back again. You know, I took her back to Germany. She was with me in Germany at the time. I brought her back to my husband. I think it must have been the same time that I took her back with me. And then we went back again a couple of years. I said, I have to bring you back to Switzerland. Brought her back, and then that I remember too. When we were at the border, they came and they tried to open my bag. I remember that. And she said, there's nothing in it. She didn't know anything. There's nothing in it. Da ist nichts drin, hat sie gesagt.
And what did they say?
They looked at her and she was so cute, they couldn't say anything. She was a little girl, 2 years old or so, 4 years old, 3 years old probably. Da ist not drin, ist nichts drin. Yeah, that's right. I brought her back. I'm glad I did that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. If I wouldn't have brought her back, you wouldn't be here, right?
Yep. So what about other relatives of Hugo's?
Yeah?
What about Hugo's family? Did you know what happened
Hugo
to them?
didn't want to go. He always told me that can't last very long. It cannot last. I grew up here. I went to school. I studied. I went for them to war. I was 4 years in a war for them. What can they do to me?
Hugo was in World War I.
Hmm?
He was
Yeah, in World War
he
I.
fought in
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
uniform.
he fought he was in France during the war. He came home because his mother had died. They had sent him home because his mother had died. And then he was shipped to Russia. He was all over the place in the First World War.
What about Opa? What did he do in World War I?
Opa was in the war too. But he was so clumsy that they sent him home.
You had said
A
once,
very expensive cannon. He disappeared, fell down in a lake or something like this. And my father was in charge of it. And I'm sure he did it. He did. And they said, Max, we cannot use you as a soldier.
You're fired.
And you were fired. He came home.
was he working with
That's
horses?
Huh?
Was he working with horses in World War I? Was Opa working with horses?
At what?
With horses, animals.
Oh, with
In
animals?
Poland?
He didn't have any idea what an animal is, my father. He didn't have any idea. He had no idea what a horse was. Yeah, he actually was working for horses and the cannons. I don't know what they did. I mean, in any case, they sent him home because he was too dumb.
Was he discharged?
No, I think he did that. That was really, it was an act. It was an act. This cannon disappeared. The horses were sick. Nothing but right.
But was he in uniform?
Of course.
Yeah.
I must have picture of my father in uniform. But he was so clumsy. My father was the A person to come here. He wanted to come here in the worst way, just the opposite of Hugo. Which was, he was very, very bright. My father was very bright. You know, my father, when he came to this country, he worked for Orbacks. All the time he was in this country, he worked for Orbacks. I don't know how many years that was.
What did he do for them?
He was in a sign shop.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know,
Like
this
a
was the,
graphic artist
yeah,
or
that was,
something?
I mean, what was along his alley. I mean, he was, and he was very friendly with Mr. Orbeck. And Mr. Orbeck was about the same age as my father, and they were both in the middle 80s. And Mr. Orbeck came to my father, and he said, Max, what do you think? We should both retire? My father said, no, I'm not quite ready. Mr. Orbeck. So Mr. Orbeck said, yeah, Max, I'm going to retire. I'm not quite ready. But he did then retire too. But he was all his life, when he was in America, he was with Orbeck's. Orbeck doesn't exist anymore.
It was a store.
Huh?
A store? It was
Yeah. Department store.
It was a big, very nice department. I loved Orbeck's.
where? What was the address?
Remember Orbeck's?
A little bit.
You don't remember?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Where were they?
They first were on in our neighborhood where we lived
Gramercy
on
Park? Lexington?
not on Gramercy Park, on the you know what was a big store, a big place down there.
Altman's? Altman's?
Now Altman's was further to the city. They were further downtown.
14th
Altman's,
Street?
14th Street,
Really?
Union Square.
Oh.
What was Union Square like then?
Was a square, like a beautiful square, and there were Orbacks, and there were lots of stores there, lots of stores.
It was a nice.
Yeah,
area.
very nice. There were clients was there. There were a real clients was my department store. We couldn't, like you have now all these stores from Saks Fifth Avenue and all these stores that have these cheaper stores, you know. Like when Mom goes to Jersey, she goes to
the
these.
outlets. The outlets.
Yeah, that was all. That was clients, and Orbach's was not far behind. Was about the same thing, and it was very nice. And later on, Union Square was a lot of. They had a lot of food.
The markets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they had a lot.
farmers
But
market.
that was much later, I
They
think.
have that still.
They still have it, I
Yeah,
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's very interesting.
Do you want to have a break?
Hmm?
Do you want to have a break? Do you want to stop for a little while?
Yeah.